rank the albums.
Hi, I'm blonde for a reason. Here's one I've actually not read up on that much, at least compared to the amount of content there is. They're one of those bands where nearly every song has a Wikipedia page, and the albums will already have been ranked hundreds of times. I've avoided paying attention to that, and I was late to the wave with ABBA. When they were first around, I was being a misogynist snob about it, sticking to the real music. Maybe it's just my allergy to anything mainstream, and quite how mainstream successful they've been. But now, 40 years on and doing a show about great music, here's some more of it. They're arguably more simplistic and more pop-oriented than things I've covered. I think there's arguments against that, but once you've accepted that every ABBA song is going to go verse, backward chorus, chorus, verse, they summon a lot of creativity within that. No, I'm not doing projects outside of the collaborative name ABBA, except this one, because when this one of the worst album covers ever was initially published, they hadn't even noticed how their first names go together yet. Well, if you change what Frida's name is. You could expect from an album's ranking standpoint that this is going back too far to get anything relevant. It's their first album together, and it's named after a single that was a Eurovision song with gimmicky onomatopoeia. But if you don't let that scare you away, this one's worth getting around to. Firstly, that single rules. Beyond that, they're figuring out which parts work as ABBA, but some of them really work. They've got the sound, they've got the lovely melodies, and it's starting out with the lovely harmonies, and that shuffle beat, the not very secret formula to the greatness of ABBA is very visible here, even if it doesn't really have any of their highlights on it. The Bs in the band haven't yet figured out that the As are much better singers, and they themselves should be kept to like one throwaway track per album that was just too horny or silly to pass it along to the women. But there's a lot of good content on here. Good, but not quite great. As far as ABBA's concerned, these guys are still pregnant with the concept. And then they come in with full confidence, another Eurovision-oriented track to name the album after, and they've solidified the themes that you'll see in some of the best of ABBA. So the yearning melodic romance, the gorgeous harmonies, the track where they learned a single cliché phrase in another language and just built a song around it. But there is the horrible tropical pastiche, and the King Kong song, which I could basically do a Hot Mess 100 video on, but I can't be bothered, so this is how it would go. This is a song inherently disposable because it's sung by Björn. Sorry, dude. But also inherently disposable because it's about a silly topic, except in its content, it isn't really about that silly topic. It's about having the idea for a silly song and using the lyrics to tell the audience you've had that idea without really committing to the idea. Basically, any song that involves rhyming, I wrote this song with maybe you could sing along. It's so dumb that it goes all the way through endearing. It's a bit endearing, but it's mostly dumb. It's cute how little that works, but this video is meant to be about what's good about ABBA. And ultimately, for an album length, there isn't actually that much of their quality material on here. It's just templates for ABBA material rather than good examples, other than the title track, which has got to be the best bop-along song about being pressured into a relationship and likening it to war and accepting that you're defeated. But it does also have Watch Out, so credit for that. Okay, get ready to be confused by album titles, and I can use that distraction to point out this is kind of the same again. Allow me in this video to delineate singles from album tracks without much attention to detail, because a lot of these things were released as singles or B-sides in some territories somewhere, but as far as obvious smashes go, there is a clear two-tier system within the works of ABBA. And considering I'm trying to use this video to point out, yeah, they're mostly known for singles and hits compilations, but they are also an albums band. I've not yet encountered any proper evidence of that. This just increases the proportion of singles, let me call them that, without yet being a satisfying whole. When you get toward the end, one of the highlights is the instrumental piece, but only kind of for a minute of it, because that isn't what we want from ABBA. This release has loads of bonus tracks from the prior two albums. Here's a text splash about it. So this one's kind of a best of in this form, but this far the album is their best. off. Okay, then they properly get there. The kind of megastars who were just shown arriving in a car and are now seen arriving in a helicopter could maybe suggest that it's gone to their heads, but I think what it's really gone to is their talent. This band flourished on popularity, and they've reached a status here that is clearly the top of their game. It'd be the top of anyone's game because it's just top game. With some of the most legendary tracks on this, especially if you've got a version that adds Fernando on at the end. I don't know if that's quite fair to consider, but now the delineation between single and album track isn't how hard they're trying. They're basically all singles. If you've ever disdained that the sound of ABBA is fucking everywhere, and it was at some point, and it probably is in Sweden, it's hard to consider that a bad thing when you listen to Arrival. Then don't forget to discern album titles, because this one's an album and it came along with a movie that I ain't gonna watch. Whatever, this continues the path of the relative maturity they struck with the last one. It reaches the scale of stadium rock pomposity, but they've earned it. They're not just at the height of their success publicly, but creatively. This could easily have been an embarrassing idea, but not when you listen to it. This is the one to show your rockist dad, and he'd have to admit they've got it sussed. The musicianship's so solid. Eagle is fucking awesome. There's just a little less that's absolutely essential, and a little less in total than their prior one. And then they're far enough through the career that the songs are no longer just about being in angsty love with someone, they're now about still being in angsty love with someone. I feel that this maturity and nostalgia is very becoming of ABBA, but it's not relieved the music of any of its pep. They've paid attention and are now throwing in a lot of disco sounds, and that's a very welcome replacement for the occasional odd little tropical song. Even the Björn song is a notable classic. With only that final track being anything less than excellent, even a children's choir can't blight this one. The answer is we. Then still more excellent, just maybe not quite at that height or density. Even the idea of singing about 1% problems such as having everyone's eyes on you comes out great. Because they've earned their way there with quality material, and this is more of it. I think there are versions of this that staple gimme 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 to the end, and that might have promoted its rank. If cracks are showing in their marriages, some entire fissures, they're not showing in their harmonies and only bolster the songwriting. Cool vocal styling too, so pure, it's like what auto-tune wants to be. The winning quality of this one almost takes it all, but if you go by the actual track list without the gimme, there's a bit less of their essential material than Voulez. Here's an ABBA that are kind of sick of each other, and here's an album that doesn't really have any of the hits on it. They've got a decade dragging behind them, but none of that holds this down. For a band where it's often easy to say, yeah, you'll like that album because it's the one with Mamma Mia on it, Voulez-Vous on it, Waterloo on it. There's not really any corollary to that because they've just made a very solid album. Still moving with the times, those vocal production tricks on the title track are very tasty. But it has to be a wind down, not quite in quality, but there's darkness setting in, but they squeeze one last dose of very satisfying ABBA material out of that. One last, I say. Yeah, all the years between, and then there was suddenly a new one. They decided they ought to come back with an album that starts with V. Maybe a surprise just given how complete that discography was, but not a surprise considering how much they're venerated and still working on projects and still friends. And actually the band aging a whole new generation brings an interesting new perspective to them that doesn't actually last. Because it works on a couple of tracks, but then there's the Christmas one on which a children's choir isn't the most soppy element, and that kind of cheesy sentiment resonates throughout. Now, cheesy sentiment has been a highlight of ABBA, it just doesn't convince here. It's not quite an embarrassing return, it's just obvious, and there's nothing impressive about it. It seems kind of scrapped together to promote that augmented reality show or whatever we're calling it. Yeah, it's fine, and you can really expect them to continue that winning streak after such a hiatus. It's more together as an album than their first few, but there's just not peaks on it. I don't know what they could have done better. The aging in their voices is actually pretty cool. No constructive criticism. We're glad you're still alive, but we don't have to be interested in any new material. They're grandmasters of melodic, harmonic, nostalgic rock pop. There's more depth depth and more drive to them than their singles might initially suggest, although their singles are also fucking awesome. And as far as albums go, about half of the discography really shows that off well, and then there's a bit more stuff. I've now investigated the online rank consensus, and my choices don't perfectly match any set I've found, but also aren't gonna offend anyone. Except you.